All right. Um, as Camille said, I'm Ethan Gannett, the mapping chair for the Colorado Cherokee Trail chapter. Thanks for your patience there while I was working with technical difficulties. Um, Today, I want to present a brief history of Cherokee and Overland Trails through Colorado. This is a presentation I actually did in at the Platteville Welcome Center at Fort Vasquez recently, and they wanted to know about the background here about the trail that came right in front of the fort there. And I thought, well, this is a nice enough presentation that you all might enjoy it as well. Now, I don't claim to be the expert. We've got Pat Fletcher on the phone, for goodness sake, so on the Zoom call. So certainly, as we get to the end, certainly share your thoughts if I see anything here that you think is a contradiction or you have alternate data. This is a picture, by the way, of Signature Rock. This is on the Overland stage line, the Park Creek Trail part of it. You can see the ruts in the foreground and Signature Rock in the background. All right, so on the agenda today, we'll do a brief introduction. I think everybody on the call here is Okta and knows Okta, so I probably won't go deep into the slide on Okta's role, and then we'll dive deep into Cherokee Trail and Overland Trail history. And then for fun, we'll talk a little bit about drone footage at the end that we took on Roberts Ranch as part of shooting some of the videos that we've been hosting from there, and then a Q&A at the end. A brief nod to the fickleness of history. Everybody knows, you've read books on history and done research, that you can get into some contradictions. It's complicated by conflicting accounts of oral histories. Sometimes story can be embellished a little bit, doesn't quite stick to the facts. Sometimes authorities that we trust in actually didn't check their work, and that can be a problem. Once in a while, you'll see opinion, emotion, or speculation introduced as fact. Sometimes, and the person reading it will think it's fact and interpret it incorrectly as non-fact or speculation, and the list goes on. The key here is that I've done my best to represent the data faithfully, but if you have alternative data to share, I'm eager to hear it at the end, as I said, because I'd love to get the story right. Pretty much you've heard about me already. I've been a member since 2019, committee chair. I'm the Facebook group admin now as well, and a member of the Northern Colorado chapter of Colorado Archaeological Society, as well as a member of the Historic Larimer County. Retired VP of Engineering, past president of Search and Rescue Manager for Larimer County, and a freelance writer. And for those who care, a Master's of Science and MBA. Everybody on the phone, I think, knows what Okta does. So this is a picture of our Okta group in Northern Colorado. That's David May, Mark Sorer, and Larry Vanagunis on the picture there. And one of the signs that we've planted recently. And as you know, all on the phone, gosh, we've got a past president on the phone, national here. We research the work. We go through. We actually are lucky to have a fellow named Martin Schlew, who did a lot of research in the 1980s on the Cherokee Trail up through the northern part of Larimer County. He and then Richard Baker in the 40s did work, as well as, of course, Lee Whiteley's book on the Cherokee Trail. And of course, I'd be remiss not to mention the Fletchers and Whiteley's volume 1 and 2 of the Cherokee Trail Diaries. All are really good resources that we've used to identify where the trail is located. And then, of course, we go in to get in the field. We ask permission. We work with the public or private entity, landowner, to get permission. Go walk the trails, look for ruts, swales, depressions, trail artifacts, catalog and GPS track those trails. Here's an example of Roberts Ranch South, where we've actually done that work. These are the trail classifications as well that we've turned in. So classification 1 through 6, as you're used to, those are the little C numbers you see there on all the trails and all the GLO crossings as well. And then our last piece of work, of course, is to turn in the National Park Service a final report. I've just finished turning in this week the final report on Roberts Ranch North. You'll see a map of that near the end here. That shows the amount of work we've been doing over the last year to map all those trails, and it's a lot of trails. I like to borrow from Lee Whiteley. I know in his presentations he he talks about these trails, and he says these trails have many names, many uses, and lots of interesting lore stories behind them. So borrowing from Lee, let's walk through and talk about these trails here. And, if you go back far enough, we're talking about game trails. Some of them evolved into Native American nomadic trails. As the fur traders started to come in the early 1800s, they began to use the trails themselves. They would trap from the trails, they would trade along the trails. And of course, this attracted trading forts. And so trade with the Native Americans and trade back and forth from east to west along the trail happened, as well as military forts began to get established as well to protect folks on the trail. And then the gold rush hopefuls start coming in 1849 and beyond. And westward immigrants start coming down the trail, such as the Mormons and others just seeking a better life in the West. And that warranted a lot more commerce along the trails. So the shipping of cargo and mail and passengers by stage on the trails started to happen then. And then that didn't flourish for very long, nearly a decade until the arrival of course, the steam train. 68 through 72, it began to work its way down through Colorado into Denver, Fort Collins, and pretty much supplant all stage needs. So I said many names. So this is all the same trails I'm talking about, but it has many names. This top part is the Trapper's Trail. You know it from 1820s and 1840s, stretched from Fort Laramie in Wyoming all the way to Taos. This is the trappers used to travel up and down to trade from Mexico all the way up to Wyoming and do fur trading as well, beaver, buffalo hide trading as well. This section here is where the Cherokee Trail starts, 1849 to the 1870s. Some say even turn of the century travel, although the trails by then were pretty horrible. But 1870s was used well into. Now, in Colorado, we tend to say, Cherokee Trail goes from Bent's Old Fort all the way to Fort Bridger in Wyoming. Now, technically, Cherokee Trail starts all the way in northwest Arkansas and eastern Oklahoma. But, for us, we think of it as keying off of the Santa Fe and starting at Bent's Old Fort. And then this last part, of course, I'm kind of talking about the Overland stage line and other stage lines that existed. The Overland, in particular, 1862 through 68, didn't last very long. That went from Julesburg to Fort Bridger, and we'll talk a little bit later as to why it ended up going from Julesburg to Fort Bridger through Colorado. So, why was it named the Cherokee Trail? Because those of us who are in northern Colorado know the Overland Trail. The Overland name is very synonymous with Western immigration and of course, the stage line. Not a lot of people know the Cherokee Trail. And when you mention the Cherokee Trail, people immediately say, the Trail of Tears. No, not the Trail of Tears. Although this is the Trail of Tears I'm showing in front of you right now, where they were marched from the east all the way out to northwest Arkansas and eastern Oklahoma. But these are the same Cherokee we're talking about. And the Cherokee in particular in Georgia were gold miners. In fact, that's one of the reasons they were kicked off that land was for the white man to get the gold. And so they proceeded they proceeded on the Trail of Tears into Arkansas and Oklahoma. And when they heard about the gold rush in 1849, they said, that's for us. We're going to join the Lewis Evans party and head west from Arkansas and Oklahoma. In fact, here's a quote from James Vann, who's a Cherokee. He was the editor of the Cherokee Advocate, also secretary of the Evans Cherokee Company. So this was very shared leadership between Cherokee and white immigrants. And he said, and shall we Cherokee not take advantage of the times and be found trying to get to this glorious country? It is free to all to take up their beds and walk. And if we mistake not, there will be a goodly number of enterprising spirits leave for California. So they were all in and very serious about heading to get their riches as well. So they joined the Evans Cherokee Company, and that's what it was called. Both Cherokee and white immigrants sharing leadership, trailblazing a path from Tahlequah, Oklahoma, up to the Santa Fe Trail. Then along the Santa Fe Trail, they traveled all the way to Bent's Old Fort. From Bensel Fort, then they traveled up the Arkansas. Now they're going on to the Trappers Trail, and then up across the Front Range, through Colorado into Wyoming and across Wyoming. And there they joined the Oregon and California Trail at Fort Bridger in Wyoming. The 1849 group really pretty much religiously followed the Trappers Trail. They came down the South Platte River to the confluence, the Cache la Poudre. That's the red line you see there. Then they were passing all the old fur trading forts there. They're all defunct by this time, 1849, and crossed the South Platte, and then headed up the north edge of the Cache la Poudre, and then up north out of Colorado into Wyoming. And then the 1849 group headed the trail across the Great Red Desert, the Great Desert of Wyoming, all the way to Fort Bridger. And that was in 1849. Now, 1850, there was a second group. We'll talk both a little more in detail about both of these groups. The Edmonton Cherokee group, again, another mixed Cherokee and white immigrant group. They shortened the route. And, let me back up for a second and notice that there's this little thing called pack you'll see on the red line there, kind of a dotted red line. We'll talk about that later, but that was part of the 1849 trail. But the 1850 trail, they cut across and went right up the north Front Range instead of following the Platte all the way to the confluence with the Poudre. Shorten the route a little bit. This largely parallels modern day 287 through Colorado. And of course added several river crossings to the journey, but it made the journey a little bit faster for them. And then they took a slightly more southern route across Wyoming. You can see it actually gives back down into Colorado around Jackson County and then out towards Fort Bridger. Both of these routes are interesting in the future when we talk about the overland. Gold was discovered in 1858. Actually, the Cherokee discovered it in 1850 in Colorado, but didn't say much about it. And then ultimately, they came back in 1858. Others heard about it. It caused a rush down the Cherokee Trail. So the Cherokee Trail was very heavily used in the 1850s for gold and other reasons for folks going to California. I think it was one of the most heavily used Western immigration trails to California was the Cherokee Trail in 1857. So that caused a lot of folks coming out. And the Cherokee name kind of just stuck, right? It was mentioned in diaries and surveys and maps, place names like Cherokee Park, even though Cherokee never actually existed in Colorado. They just came through back and forth. It just started to stick. Everybody would call it the Cherokee Trail. Here's an article from the Rocky Mountain News from 1860 showing a discussion of a Dr. Atkinson who talked about his journey along the trail and gave a complete itinerary of the distances to each camping spot and how he would go from Denver to Fort Bridger along the Cherokee Trail. So that's how the Cherokee Trail got its name, and it just stuck. And so you'll see that throughout all diary entries. They stopped calling it Trappers Trail. Obviously, there was some unique trail there as well that was uniquely Cherokee Trail. So let's go a little bit deeper into the 1849 Evans Cherokee Company. There were 4 divisions of 10 wagons each in the first wagon train. So 129 folks, 301 oxen, 41 mules, 65 horses, 31 cows, and $20,000 in combined cash. So almost 3 to 4 times as much livestock along with them as people. Only one woman, she was a brave woman, and then 2 girls and 1 boy on that first trip. They left April 24th, 1849, largely timed to be timed with the tall spring grasses for feeding the oxen along the way. And notice, of course, that the picture of the oxen in the previous picture, largely these were the wagons were driven by oxen, primarily mules, very rarely horses. Horses were ridden, and used, but horses were a lot more expensive than oxen. And the oxen they could use to walk alongside and drive along with the bullwhacker, and just kept pace with somebody just walking alongside the wagon. So they arrived at Bensall Fort on June 13th. Interesting enough, only a couple of months before Charles Bent blew it up, then moved his fort downstream a little bit and rebuilt it. Um, and then they arrived in Pueblo on June 18th. So remember, they started in April. Now they're in June. They arrived in Pueblo. They stopped there to do repairs and shoeing of horses. And Pueblo itself actually didn't have a very great reputation at the time. Many of the diary entries were kind of disparaging of Pueblo. Here's an example of one from Hiram Davis of the Evans Cherokee Company. No persons live here but 10 men and as many women. The most abandoned set of thieves, Mexicans, Indians, half-breds that ever disgraced any spot on earth, and as lousy as rabbits. Well, apologies to anybody from Pueblo. Hopefully it's a little better by now. Uh, but definitely, not a very glowing representation. And you'll see why a little bit later here as to why folks didn't take kindly to some of the Puebloans. In fact, there were cutoff trails that were used, the Chico Creek cutoff, the Divine cutoff, that just avoided Pueblo altogether. Now, that obviously saved time, and effort to do these little shortcut diagonal trails. So it wasn't all about the bad people of Pueblo, but certainly about trying to get the quickest travel from A to B. When they were in Pueblo, they talked to a lot of traders, and the original Cherokee Evans Cherokee group thought that they would just cross the mountains to Salt Lake. Yeah, we'll just go right across and get there. And of course, the traders told them it's like there's no way you can do that, not with a wagon, and not even pack would be very difficult. Don't try that. Instead, use the Trapper Trail, go north, go past the old fur trading forts, and then all the way up to Fort Laramie, and then join the Oregon California Trail there. Right. And so this concerned, the group, and the group began to divide, and the group divided into three different groups. One who wanted to go ahead and stay using the wagons and going down the trail. Another group that said, no, we got to switch to a pack train. We got to get rid of all of our wagons and move the mules and make it easy going for us. So they switched to pack, and about a dozen 4 wagons decided to turn back home. So they actually went back home. Let's believe they made it back because they actually carried letters back home and those got delivered. But this was a trying time in Pueblo to decide, what do we do? Should we continue or not? And here's a good example of the kind of angst it caused when they discussed these travels with the locals. It cost 30 men to dispose of their wagons and what provisions they would not carry at great sacrifice. One wagon selling for as low as $5. One offered 1 mule and 7 pack saddles for a wagon and a team. So you can imagine how disheartening this was to those who were traveling with all their gear and then having to sell it for pennies on the dollar. This was Daniel Gunther. He was also a Cherokee with the Evans Cherokee Company, giving this quote. There are other diary examples, entries where they couldn't even sell it, and they didn't want to leave it behind because they knew, the locals would use it. So they piled it all up in a big pile in the middle of the street and burned it. So pretty trying time in Pueblo to divide up and head north. As I said, many of the Cherokee, there was this packing group. So many of the Cherokee actually joined the packing group. They were smart. There was one of the traders they talked to was Dick Owens. Both companies, the wagon and the packing company, were vying for Dick, who was a friend of Kit Carson and obviously a trapper and a guide. So he knew these trails very well. The packers got to him to employ him to lead them. And if you remember that little pack trail I pointed out, that was one of the little sneaks that the trappers actually used to get to Fort Bridger quicker than the wagons did. And of course, it was easier traveling with mules. And it's believed they made it all the way to California because actually, interesting enough, Dick Owens is listed in the census of 1850 in Yolo County, California. Just one drowning death along the way to Fort Bridger in Green River. So it was a pretty successful trek. Now, the wagon trains that remained, there were 29 left. They were joined by other wagon trains that had gotten there while they were doing their repairs. And they traveled and followed the Trappers Trail north. The trader forts, remember, were all defunct, but Fort St. Vrain becomes remarkable because the logs were still there. So it took them 4 days to ferry across the South Platte, and here's how they did it. We made a ferry boat at St. Vrain's Fort out of plank that we found there and took it down the Platte 17 miles to the mouth of another stream. That'd be the Cashel-Pooter. And the boat was large enough to carry the largest of the wagons without unloading them. So they made a pretty massive raft. We're lucky enough the water was high enough that they could float it 17 miles, and then use that to forge, get across the South Platte. So once they got across the South Platte, now they're on the north side of Cashel-Pooter, and guess what? There is no road there. The Trappers Trail goes off to the northeast, and there's no road along the northern part of the Cashel-Pooter. So they started cutting road, and pretty aggressively cutting a road along the north side. And the road would stretch to the confluence of the South Platte all the way to the North Platte in Wyoming. And this was truly Cherokee Trail, right? The first cut of this trail that was known of. And here's a quote from John Rankin Pyatt. We sought out from this place without road, trail, or guide. Remember, they don't even have a guide at this point. They're kind of making it on their own. Through the plains and hills, we succeeded very well for 15 to 20 miles a day for some time. Imagine building road, all that way, 15, 20 miles a day. Pretty impressive. Okay, so to cut short so we can move to the overland, they made it. Surprise. They got to Fort Bridger later, like I said, than the pack team got there. They got there on August 5th. They only suffered one death along the way as well. Somebody who was already sickly that had been on the train itself. The Cherokee at this point parted ways. I think they realized, hey, the trail's right here. It's easy to follow. We're on the California Trail now. And they took tow wagons and headed out. It's believed many made it to California. In fact, many of the Cherokee actually came back from California when either they got their riches or didn't succeed in getting their riches, and they came back to the reservations. All right, if you want to know more about the Cherokee Trail, as Camille mentioned at the top, there's a whole series of videos we shot in May, 8 episodes, an overview that Lee had done, and then we take you from Bensoul Fort, pretty much traveling that south to north route that the original Evans Cherokee group did, from Bensoul Fort through Independence and Jimmy Camp, Blackfoot Cave, Gold Strike Park. We talk about the Gold Rush, Mariana Medina Family Cemetery, and their toll bridge, across the Big Thompson, and then finishing up with Jack Slade and Virginia Dale Station. Really nice series. If you go to the Oregon California Trail Association YouTube channel, you may have to spell it out. If you spell it Octa, you might get OKTA, but you'll know it when you're there and you find it. And if you scroll down, you'll see the series down below. Some other interesting videos of note. One on trail sleuthing, where I kind of talk through all the aspects of how Octa does trail finding, using our knowledge of GLO survey crossings and metal detection and sightseeing and research, etc. I kind of walk through that all in one video, and then also one on the hanging of Lewis Musgrove. Lewis and his gang were notorious along the Cherokee Trail, especially stealing government livestock. And suffice it to say, he met his demise by hanging in Denver, obviously, but not until he wreaked a lot of havoc along the trail. Okay, let's switch gears to the overland stage line lineage. Stage line started being used early on in 1859. The Leavenworth and Pikes Peak Express Company had a stage line that just followed along the Oregon California Trail through the South Pass route. They didn't function very well for very long. They kind of went bankrupt and got bought out by Russell's, Majors, and Waddell. They renamed it the Central Overland California and Pikes Peak Express, are the COC and PP. And they're the ones that started, of course, the Pony Express. And they did wonderful job of setting this up. Started running it April 3rd, 1860. These are an actual picture of some of the Pony Express riders. Ran for 18 months. Did an excellent job. Could deliver mail in 10 to 11 days, from Missouri all the way to California. But they lost the U.S. mail contract unbelievably to some other entities. And so as part of losing that contract and all the investment they made, they were beginning to go bankrupt themselves with the line. By the way, COC and PP, the Pony Express riders had another name for this, which was clean out of cash and pays poorly. So you can imagine how difficult it was to be a Pony Express rider, and that they really weren't paid very well for such a hard job that they did. But there's the Pony Express line, great map of it. People always ask me, it's like, oh, the Pony Express go through Colorado? Well, just a little bit through Julesburg. You can see it dipping into Colorado on the Julesburg there, but that was it. It largely just followed the Oregon-California Trail to the South Path route of Wyoming. So along comes Ben Holiday, who was a real transportation, businessman. Had ships, had stage lines. Really quite a strong businessman. He bought out the CLC and PP in March 21st, 1862. He actually had won a postal contract from Missouri to Salt Lake City, and so he wanted to buy out this line to help deliver the mail and cargo along that line. And he made a huge investment in the line, reinvesting in stations, men, and horses and supplies. And that was all going well for a very short while until the Native American attacks started to happen. And we'll talk about that in detail in the next slide. But his business lasted until 1866, where he sold to Wells Fargo. And then the line dies in 1869. And there was a foreshadowing of why the line dies in 1869. Hopefully you all can guess it on the phone. It's because the Transcontinental Railroad was completed in Promontory, Utah, where they met. And at this point now, the stage lines move from transporting people and cargo and mail to maybe transporting people to the train station, right? So they don't last very long, and that's not a very lucrative business, and the trains took over from there. So now let's rewind the clock a little bit and say, okay, why did the Overland Stage Line move to Colorado? Well, like I said, the Native American attacks in 1862 were happening in Nebraska and Wyoming, response to Sand Creek massacres as well. And so Ben Holiday appealed to the U.S. government and said, can I move the line south? I want to move the line south, go through Colorado, pop up, go through a more southerly route along the southern part of Wyoming to Fort Bridger. And this will allow me to keep the route running, because these Indian attacks have taken out all the stations, stole all the horses, hay, killed or run off, the stage line drivers. It's a mess. And so the U.S. government said, yeah. Now, we'll talk a little bit later why this is an incredibly good business move by Ben. But you'll notice here the trail followed the South Platte, up the South Platte to the Poudre River. Remember, Poudre River confluence is very important in Cherokee Trail. Then they followed, if you follow that red line, out along the north part of Cache la Poudre. That's the road the Cherokee Trail built, right? And then the Cherokee Trail leading out up through Virginia Dale and up through Wyoming. And then they're following that 1849 Cherokee Trail route out to Fort Bridger. Notice the little green line there dropping down to Denver. That's really important. That green line goes right by the forts, the old trader forts. So that's also that 1849 Cherokee Trail route. And then the green line coming back up, there's that 1850 Cherokee Trail route. And in fact, the 1850 route is the one that they end up using going across the southern part of Wyoming, not the 1849 route. Okay, so like I said, we went across South Wyoming using the 1850 Cherokee Trail. And then, and here's the great business move he did. it was a great excuse to be able to say, well, the Native Americans have attacked. We need to move the line. But actually, what Ben Halliday knew was he was that much closer to Denver. Denver was a major hub. He actually got 150 miles, believe it or not, closer in the route going to Salt Lake City by dipping down in Colorado. Because remember, the original Oregon-California trail route went way north into Wyoming and then down across South Pass. Here, he's making a much more east-west route, even though he's dipping down into Colorado. So he's saving distance. He's now has a major hub in Denver that he can do cargo and mail and passengers to. And so that was incredibly lucrative for him. Ultimately, he abandoned that route going by the old trader forts and moved the route to go from Fort Morgan to Bennett and then to Denver. And in northern Colorado, he also in 1862 built this Park Creek route that maybe made it a little bit quicker to come down. He had to traverse this thing called Devil's Washboard. You can see near the top there under Steamboat Rock. So it's Devil's Washboard. That's a little precarious. We'll see some video of that later. But this was maybe a little bit better route to take. And some research says that both routes continue to be used, some for north travel, some for south travel. You know, can you imagine? Maybe I don't want to climb Devil's Washboard going from north to south. Maybe I would rather go down Double Team Hill going from north to south when I've got a big freight load, you know, or go down and avoid Devil's Washboard altogether. So this is the reason these multiple different routes were used. And it's made it very complicated for us to do research in Larimer County because we have all these intersecting rocks that were used contemporaneously between Cherokee and Overland at the same time. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that along this time when the stage lines were running, the camps started to develop Camp Collins, which ultimately comes the namesake of Fort Collins, where I live, Fort Sanders, Fort Halleck, all established to protect travelers along the trail. And that's when these really started to get established. So if you notice, let me go back a second. There's lots of little stations along the way here. So there was a stage station every 10 miles or so, 10, 15 miles. Most of those were what was called a swing station. Very simple station, sod roof, you know, very small. They were just used for switching out or swinging out the horses when the horses were tired. That's largely what they were used for, nothing more. But then there was the home stations. So the home stations were kind of like the big boys of the swing stations. They had all the supplies for the other stations. They had horses, different driver teams that could stay over, food, of course, to supply. The stage drivers and horse teams could be refueled and rested. Some passengers could rest there, although albeit not very easily. Not a lot of great accommodations here. This was not even a Motel 6, you know, at this point. Maybe one bed was, they were lucky to have one, and everybody else slept on the floor. Mail, luggage supplies all came through these home stations, got distributed, you know, locally through there. About 9 passengers a day, you know, would come through. And here's a little quote. Lodgings are not extensive in this locality. The speaker borrowed a bed, 2 slept on the floor. 2 of us rolled ourselves up on the floor. This is Sammy Bowles traveling with, the speaker is Schuyler Colfax, the speaker of the House at that time. Other dignitaries were traveling. And this was in Virginia Dale Station, I believe they were talking about at the time. And he goes on to say how 2 a.m. in the morning, he's laying on the floor, and here comes a drive team coming in, loud, vociferous as hell, hungry, wanting to be fed. And he said, you know, he said, we're always sleeping. The lice weren't as vociferous, but they were just as hungry. So you can imagine just how difficult it was, you know, sleeping in these accommodations. It was not pleasant. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Virginia Dale Station and the origins of it. So Ben Halliday hired Jack Slade. He was a division agent originally along the Overland line, that line that went up through on the Oregon-California Trail through South Pass. He was hired as a division agent to keep the new route that dropped down in Colorado secure. So he established all these stations every 10 miles. Imagine establishing all these stations, outfitting them in just a matter of a couple months, getting drive teams, moved down, getting everything moved down to set this up in just a couple months. So quite a monumental task by Jack Slade. And he was known as a really good division agent. People were basically scared of him. People didn't want to rob along his lines because he was a tough cookie to deal with, and so he scared off a lot of robbers and thieves. And he established in 1862 in July the Virginia Dale Station as a home station. So this is a William Henry Jackson picture of the thing. If you notice, by the way, along the lines here, I've been showing some of the imagery behind here has all been William Henry Jackson prints. So he founded the station as a home station. He named it after his wife, Virginia. Some say Virginia Dale. I think, and I believe, according to all the research I've done, that the Dale is the actual, bucolic little area back there with the creek running through it. That's the Dale. So Virginia Dale is kind of named from the stage, his wife, and then the Dale that was back behind there where everybody would camp. So this is believed to be a picture of Virginia. We think maybe that was her. And then the Overland Trail, as I said, made this Park Creek route coming up through. And whether it was the Park Creek route, the Cherokee Overland route that went up through this other way, they all met at Cherokee Station, also known as 10 Mile Station or Stonewall Creek Station. And that was a swing station. And that was a swing station before we got to Virginia Dale, which is the home station. So the Virginia Dale stayed as a home station, regardless of which direction the stages were coming or immigrants were coming in from. Ansel Waters, who was a famous historian from Lara County area, said, the route was incredibly successful. He said it was so successful that no stagecoach was delayed or mail missed along the way. So real successful division agent. And the cool thing is you can still visit if you're ever in Colorado. Those of you who are in Colorado, Virginia Dale Station's open twice a year. Once in June, usually like the second Saturday of June, is an open house. And then in December, they have a quilting bee and raffle. And so you can see the station, and it's in great shape. They've spent 20 years restoring this to its original condition. So beautiful condition and well worth seeing if you ever want to see a true original home stage station. All right, now comes the fun part of this. And since you're all on mute, I'm not going to do the audience participation part of it. But this is a little factor fishing I like to do on Jack Slade, Alfred Jack Slade. Joseph Alfred Slade is his real name. Jack was his nickname, by the way. So Teamster, factor fiction, Teamster, wagon master, stagecoach driver. Well, of course, that's fact, right? Now it gets a little harder. Vicious drunk, capable of murder. Well, yes and no. Kind of a fact. I mean, there was at least 2 murders that he could be attributable to. So yeah, he's a murderer. Maybe not 26 murders, as some attribute it to him. Vicious drunk. When he was drunk, yeah, he's a pretty bad guy. But when he was sober, you can see he was an excellent division agent and really kept a clean running line. So very interesting dichotomy with somebody who maybe had a drinking problem, but was Virginia Slade tried to keep him from drinking as much as he could. Helped launch the Pony Express. Yes, he did. Yeah, just before, remember that happened in 1860-61. He was one of the division's agents helping set that all up. So really, really good on his part. Imagine setting that all up and then turning around and breaking it all down after the Indian attacks and moving it all to Colorado. That's the kind of guy he was. And, Dan Rottenberg has a great book on Jack Slade, the gunslinger Jack Slade, dispelling a lot of the fact versus fiction and getting to the root of his real story. And largely what I'm showing you here is Dan's account of what the real story is. Cut off Jules Benny's ear for a keepsake. That's true, and we'll talk about it in a second. Robbed the stage of $60,000 in coin. Total lore. No evidence whatsoever he could do that. And do that to his own line? That doesn't make sense. Especially when you hear about why he cut off Jules Benny's ear, you realize it's not likely. Now, there was gold coin stolen off the stage line, but there's nothing that can attribute him to being part of that. Met Mark Twain. Well, this is another one of those yes but ones, right? Well, yeah, he met Mark Twain, and it may have even been at Virginia Dale Station, but of course, Mark loved to embellish his story. So a lot of what Mark tends to say and roughing it, yeah, maybe quite an embellishment of who Jack Slade really was. But interesting enough, Mark wrote very kindly about Jack Slade when meeting him, that he was a very genteel, cordial man. Fired as a division agent for drunken midgets. Yeah, this is the part I didn't tell you. He didn't even last for a year. So he had a big drinking problem. And so when he was being that division agent for that route through Colorado, he ultimately did one too many oopsies being drunk and got fired for as a division agent for Overland Stage Company. Shot up a courthouse on horseback. Yeah, he did this in Virginia City, Montana, trying to disrupt a court battle going on. Sounds like an old Western lore. Well, some of this stuff really did happen. Shot up a saloon in LaPorte for selling liquor, in particular, selling liquor to his drivers. And that was, interesting enough, true. He made a mess of the place. He poured molasses and flour on the floor, and they skidded down the floor, supposedly, and shot it all up. And the next day he came sober and apologized, gave the saloon owner $800 for his troubles and said, sorry I did that, but don't ever sell liquor to my drivers. Interesting for a problem. We had a person who had a problem with drinking himself, that he was that careful about making sure his drivers were not drunk. Hung by vigilantes. Yep, one of the last things the vigilante crew did in Virginia City, Montana, was to hang Jack Slade for all the nasty things he did there too. So just ended up unfortunately in a bad situation and got hung for it. This one I love. Transported in an alcohol-filled tin coffin to Salt Lake City from Virginia City, Montana. True. What a fitting end for an alcoholic to be transported, preserved basically in a lead or tin-filled coffin filled with alcohol. Maria Virginia actually kept him underneath her bed for a couple months before going back to Salt Lake. She was trying to make it all the way back to Illinois, but that's as far as she could make it. And he is buried in a pauper's grave in Salt Lake City. And you can look at that sometime if you're ever in Salt Lake City. There is one more fact or fiction on this page. And at this point, I would take ideas from the audience, but here's the fact or fiction. This is not Jack Slade, right? This is a romanticized version, maybe a Western TV version of Jack Slade. You can see that the silhouette, the image of the profile I have of him is very similar to this one. Jack Slade was a stout man, ruddied hair, maybe 160 pounds, maybe 5'6", 5'8", somewhere around there. Didn't look a bit like this, but this is the one and only image that's out there, supposedly representing him, but in fact, probably not him. All right. So I told you I was going to tell you a little bit about Slade versus Benny. So let's do this real quickly. Jules Benny was actually a division agent before Jack Slade in Julesburg. In fact, Julesburg was named after Jules Benny. He built the town. He built the saloon and the hotel and the restaurant and, everything there. Ultimately, the first Julesburg got burned down. This is a sketch of the first the Indian attacks on Native American attacks on Julesburg and it getting burned down. But Jack was a division agent. But Jack kind of had a little side job. He was stealing company horses. He'd steal them or run them off, have a compatriot corral them back up. Sometimes he would actually sell them back to the government. Oh, I caught them for you. Now let me sell them back. I had to pay this guy for finding them, or he'd keep them for his own. So he was doing this on a regular basis, and he finally got caught for it and fired. And Jack ultimately replaced him along that line, as you remember. Well, he thought that Jack was the reason he got fired. And so Jules actually ambushed Jack one day in Julesburg, shot him dead with shotgun and then a pistol to boot. Thought he was dead because he was shot multiple times. Told the guys there, there's some wood and nails right over there. Bill him a coffin. He's dying. Thought he was dead, but interesting enough, he survived it. And he was nursed back into health on a hay pile, drinking cow's milk. And ultimately, he was shipped back to Missouri to get some surgery. And he made it back. And Ben Holiday supposedly told him, this is Ansel Waters' account, that, Ben Holiday telling Jack, now that you're back, get that fellow Jules and don't let everybody know you got him. Uh, uh, um, and let everybody know you got it, because it was an insult, right, to the stage company that Jack was shot by Jules and Jules was still roaming about. So Jack put out a bounty on Jules, and Jack's men hunted him down. Unfortunately, there was a bring him back alive policy, but in the gunfight, Jules ended up dying of his gun wounds. But they still wanted the bounty. So here comes the interesting part of the story, right? They ended up tying Jules to a corral, said he was still alive, right? They wanted the bounty. They brought Jack over there, and Jack walked up to him and said, he's not alive, and let me prove it to you. And he cut an ear off, and he said, look, see, he didn't even flinch. Now, some of the lore says he cut the other ear off too, but at least cut one ear off. And then he kept that ear, and because this was his proof, right, that he'd killed Jules, had Jules Binney killed. And he used the ear as a watch fob and joke to warn others of his prowess. He would sometimes pull it out of his pocket and try to pay for a drink, a bar drink with the ear. At one point, he was rumored. This was actually a diary entry where he took the ear out and put some little rocks in it and made a little rattle out of it to soothe a crying girl, one of the immigrants that was in the station. So several stories around him using the ear after that. And that's the story of Slade versus Benny. All right, we got a couple minutes left. Let's do this drone footage really quick. This is the map of Roberts Ranch North. This is the work we just finished and turned into National Park Service. You can see the extensive trails across here. And these are all the Cherokee potential trails, some of them overlapping with the Overland time period. So it's hard for us to tell which are Cherokee and which are Overland, but definitely the Cherokee comes in from the south down there at the bottom of the slide, splits out, goes up over Double Team Hill one way, goes up to an old saloon foundation and potential blacksmith shop the other way. And then there were multiple different trails coming across to Cherokee Station. Some we discovered, like the Octa Bisection Trail, which Martin Schlew and Richard Baker never found, but has had some of the best evidence of a trail routage that we've seen on the ranch. Others that go through the Buffalo Wallows, and some that even bypass the station, I should say, the Cherokee Station. The Cherokee Station is over on the left-hand side there, you can see in the image. So let's zoom in a little bit, and you can see this area we're going to talk about. So where the drone's going to fly is on that yellow trail there you see. That's the Bisection Trail. It's going to first fly west to east along the trail. Go across, you'll see the sign. That little cross there is the trail sign we put actually at an intersection of trail crossing. So you'll see that intersection, how deep it is, and we'll fly down the hill a little bit. And then you'll see the reverse angle where we'll fly back up along the Bisection Trail. And then we'll fly up in the air and give you a nice 180 degree view. You'll see Steamboat Rock in the background, and then you'll see Devil's Washboard coming down. And you can see this on the image here where Devil's Washboard is. So just keep that image in your mind. And then we'll also show we'll do a fly down, a little fly over my shoulder to Devil's Washboard. We'll do a fly over the blacksmith shop and saloon, looking back at that trail, that orange trail going south there, north-south. So you'll see that as well. And then we'll end it with some signature rock, and those ruts fly over, and Steamboat Rock. All right. There we go. Everybody see that okay? All right. So this is a Bisection Trail. You can see multiple ruts. You can say, oh my gosh, Ethan, those are just cattle. But actually there are multiple parallel ruts coming down the trail, ruts and swales, a lot of erosion. You're beginning to see the cross section of these trails crossing the Wallows Trail and Bisection Trail. There's our white Octa Trail sign. And so that was that. Now we're going to go back the other way. We're going to climb up the hill. I've seen pictures from 1867 of this, and it's almost like a 2-lane highway going up the stage line. So this is going up the hill now, the direction going from east to west. We're going to come up to that intersection again. You see all the ruts in parallel going up here. And to the left is, you can see the little white sign there. That's the Octa Trail sign there. Now we're going to lift up, and you're going to pan out. We'll look across the Buffalo Wallows. Right now you're looking down the bisection trail. You can see those trails going out. And then we're going to start rotating here in a second. That's direction is out the Buffalo Wallows, the Steamboat Rock, which is a primary rock was used for navigation along the trails. And just at the end here, if you look on the right, you'll see Devil's Washboard come into view there. Now we're coming across Devil's Washboard along the Park Creek route over my shoulder, and you'll see Devil's Washboard going down, and what a horrible, ruddy, gravelly trail that was, and maybe why a saloon was at the bottom to take a drink after going down this horrible trail. This is now the trail coming up from the saloon around the dashboard, and off to the right is that bisection trail and the Wallace Trail. And looking down the valley, this is another one of the Cherokee trails coming up the valley that was, I call a freighter's route or saloon route, because it didn't have to deal with climbing up Double Team Hill. We'll pan off to the left, and you see, again, just peek in on the left here is Devil's Washboard right there. And we're looking back up Devil's Washboard now. Okay. Here's the old saloon foundation. We've been doing archaeological work on this, looking for any clues that there's perhaps a saloon here. And then blacksmith shop site, we've worked this site as well too. Not a lot of evidence there for blacksmiths. Signature Rock, Overland Ruts. This is what the title slide I showed you. We're now back ways from Signature Rock. We're going to fly towards Signature Rock along all the various ruts that go up this hill. And again, this is the Overland Park Creek route going in, and this heads up to Devil's Washboard. So we're seeing all the ruts along the ways. They'll come into view even more here as we fly up. And Signature Rock has multiple different signatures on it. Some date back as far as perhaps 1858. So that's pretty cool. And then we'll do one last shot of Steamboat Rock. This is the rock that was used for everybody to navigate. You can see it from quite a distance away. If you go out to Oregon, California Trail Association, Colorado Cherokee Trail chapter, all spelled out, you should get to our new revised chapter page, Facebook page. If you see recent postings, you know you're at the right place. If you see really old postings, you know you're at an old place that hasn't been yet deprecated, so it's still out there, but we're trying to get that removed.